Good morning everyone. So today I am trying to review a Nissan 370z. However, as you can see, this isn't the ideal weather for it. It's a little bit cold. Now, just at the weekend I was reviewing the GTR in wet conditions and I didn't think it could possibly get less ideal, but I was wrong. I asked the car's owner, Nick, earlier whether the car had a limited slip diff on it, and we weren't sure, but I am now reasonably certain that it does not, or if it does, it's useless. I mean, let's face it, if you own a rear-wheel drive sports car, one of life's great pleasures is donuts in the snow, and this won't do it, which is a shame. So, how does one review a 330 horsepower rear-wheel drive sports car in conditions like this? With great difficulty. So this car has appealed to me for a number of reasons. The main one is I just constantly I forever forget that these even exist. The 370 and the 350, when people come to me and ask for, you know, ideas for like 10-15,000 pound, usually first sort of sports cars, I never ever remembered to tell people about these. I mean, I'd never driven one, and I know that when the 350 came out, the reception by the motoring press was, I'd say, lukewarm at best. I think some magazines were very, very harsh on it. But this model's been around for a while now, and you don't really see them. I'm told that there are apparently less than 2,000 of these on the road, and I can well believe that. I really don't see them that often. In my local town, I'm sure there was a guy that used to own, and maybe still does, a Nismo one of these, and that looked really, really sexy. It was in white. I don't know if they did other colours for the Nismo, but it was a really good looking car, and they sound very nice too. There's a guy here in the UK called Terry Grant who does a stunt show, and he uses either a 350 or 370, one of the two. I'm not good enough to know from just sight which is which. And he uses it in his stunt show, and they sound awesome, especially with a little bit of an exhaust mod. Now, speaking of exhaust mods, that's the only modification to this car. It's got a Scorpion back box on it. Oh, there's a guy that's going to be having even less fun than me. Now, the 370 is of particular interest to me at the moment because my brother-in-law is thinking of swapping his Golf R for one. Now, that's the Golf R that you'll have seen in the review I did at the end of last year. And he's looking for something that's going to be a little bit more exciting, a little bit more different, more of a sports car, because he agreed with my assessment that the Golf R is a great car in many, many regards. However, it's not much of a sports car. This, however, certainly looks the part. It sounds great too, and they're incredibly affordable. Examples of the 350 start from around about £5,000, and I've seen good examples of these at around 15. He was looking at a Nismo, and that was only around 20,000, and that's a hell of a lot of car on the face of it for the money. And once we get away from the snow, what we have on the roads here is basically a very low temperature. It is 0 outside and a little bit of water. It's not actually too wet today. So let's talk about the engine in this car very briefly. Now, this is a 3.7 litre unit that is very familiar to other territories, but in the UK, this is the only car we got this engine in. So if you're viewing from abroad, you have to remember that we don't get a lot of cars that other places get. Now, this is based on what Nissan still call the Skyline. We don't get that car. Nissan never really sold that here. In fact, Skylines other than GTRs never really ever appeared in the UK. People weren't especially interested in them, and we don't get the modern equivalent of this. And this is the only application we have of this engine. And in terms of numbers, it produces 330 horsepower and around 270 pound-foot of torque. So in comparison to that Golf R, that's about 30 horsepower up and about an equal amount of torque down. So it's fairly even. Of course, being a naturally aspirated engine, you have to work a little bit harder to get those numbers. This revs to 7,500, which is a decent figure for a fairly chunky engine. 3.7 from a V6, that's a pretty decent displacement. For another reference, those are basically the same kind of numbers that you'd get from a US spec E46 M3. Over there they had about 10 horsepower less than we did. The suspension setup in this car is quite advanced. It's double wishbone front and it's a multi-link rear. I'm looking forward to getting onto some slightly better roads so I can judge what the steering is like. It's not full of feel, but I wasn't expecting it to be. However, it might improve at slightly greater speed if I can find somewhere that's safe to do greater speed. On fairly broken roads, the car is reasonably comfortable, certainly not as firm as a GTR. Something that will help that is the fact that this car weighs some 300 to 400 kilos less than a GTR. So that's good. The curb weight's around 1,460 kilos. They did change quite a bit between the 350 and 370. I've never driven either before, but the wheelbase in this is quite a bit shorter and the engine is a fair bit pokier in the 370, and that's one of the main reasons that this car's owner went with the 370 over the 350. It picks up quite well from about 3,500 RPM, 4,000. You've got to work for that speed, but that's the joy of a sports car, surely. Oh, this car has auto rev matching as well. Now, that's a source of some debate between many people as to whether that's the best thing ever or just the beginning of the end for drivers' cars. Well, you'll be pleased to know there's a little button down here and you can turn it off very, very easily. I've left it on at the minute because today's not a day where I'm going to be doing a lot of heel and towing, and it's going to make the clutch last longer, and I'm sure Nick will appreciate that. This gearbox is a real joy to use. The shifts are nice and meaty, the throw is quite short. It's actually very similar to the shift in the Evora, which is high praise. I do get a real feel from this car, even at lower speeds, that I am very much in a sports car. When I'm in the Golf R, I could be in basically any VAG product from the last 10 years. It's all very much of a muchness. It all sort of feels the same, looks the same, drives the same, goes the same. It has the same engine that they've been using in the GTI forever. But there's just something a little bit different about this. Like, yes, the interior materials are of a slightly lower quality and so on and yada yada, but I feel like the money is being spent elsewhere and this feels like a more special experience. Now, another nice thing is that you can actually see some of this bonnet from inside here. The car's got quite a high waistline. You do feel very much like you're sat down low and in it. It's another important trait of a sports car. And being able to see those ridges in the bonnet is really, really nice. Actually, in many ways, that does ape the kind of look that you get out from the GTR. It's maybe actually a little bit more pronounced, but it's nice to be able to see a bonnet. As many sports cars are defined, you know, front engine rear-wheel drive sports cars in particular are defined by their long bonnets, Aston Martins, Jaguars, and actually when you get in them, you can't even see that bonnet. So that's always a bit of a shame. So I apologise that this has not been the most high-octane review thus far, but between the snow and the farm vehicle carrying a lot of hay, it's been an interesting day. Let's say that. Ah, look, a road I can use the car on. It's very, very linear power, very, very smooth. Doesn't go mad towards the red line, but it certainly moves. I'd say the Golf R feels faster. Probably isn't faster, maybe it is, I don't know. But subjectively that will feel quicker. It is geared quite short, however. This is geared a lot longer, so that's going to have a lot to do with it. This certainly has got plenty of poke. Yeah, if you're in 6 at 60 mile an hour, whatever, you need to make an overtake, definitely change down, but that's cars. You need to drive them, use the stick here to get it to do what you want it to do. So steering's nice. At speed, the steering's really nice. It's very direct. Not a lot of feel through it, but it's really direct. A little lane change at the minute is the best thing I can get for now. It's it's a good feel. I love cars with double wishbone front suspension. If you can get double wishbones all round or double wishbone and multi-link, they just always seem better. Except for Porsche. Porsche always seem to get away with a McPherson strut, and I don't know how they manage it. I can see why people would prefer something like a Cayman over this, but the truth is they're very, very different cars. A Cayman is a much more finely honed sports car. However, from my memory, and it is a distant memory, I would say this would make a much better GT car than a Cayman would. A Cayman of the time, so you'd be comparing this with the first gen Cayman, the 987, and those were pretty stiff. This is a reasonably practical car still, like the Cayman is too. You've only got the one boot in this, of course, because 2 boots is fairly extravagant. But it's reasonably, I'd say, Corvette-sized. So for my American viewers, that's how big the boot is. Quite wide, quite long, but very, very shallow. On a good back road, there's adequate performance out of this car, definitely. You've got nice views out the side, because you can see those flared rear arches. And it makes a nice noise. I would say with this Scorpion back box, the noise level in here is just right. It's not silly loud, obviously you'll be able to hear it more with the windows down, but when you're then just cruising along on the motorway, it's perfectly refined. So unfortunately from today, I'm not really going to be able to draw a definitive conclusion for you of the 370 because I honestly don't think I've been able to assess it fair enough. I've not had the time nor really the weather for it. However, I'm very, very thankful to Nick for offering me the car to drive, and it's been a very positive experience. It's certainly a sports car. So for my brother-in-law, for Andrew, who's thinking of swapping his Golf R for one, I'd definitely try it. Now, oddly, this car's owner, Nick, said he'd be definitely better off keeping the Golf R, but I'm not so convinced. If he needed to put people in the back and do all that sort of stuff, then sure, the Golf is a great car, but sports car, it is not. This, however, is.